You're always such a useless guy. This incompetence. Saying that, my boss threw the documents he had in his hand at me. As the papers fluttered through the air, an unpleasant laughter echoed in my eardrums. Incompetent. Those words stabbed at my heart like a knife. My name is Daniel Brown. I've been living in a rural area surrounded by fields and mountains since I was a child. When I was a child, I couldn't afford video games, so I spent my time catching bugs and fishing. Recently, this area has started to develop, but all things considered, I think the times when I innocently ran around in nature were the most enjoyable. I've been swamped with work, especially compared to such a now. I'm a salesperson at a company located a bit away from my hometown. I've been working there since this year, but I actually have a big problem. There's this unbelievable boss named Miller. He graduated from a famous university, and he caused trouble in his previous department and was transferred here 2 years ago, or rather, demoted. He is a person with a shady past. In his previous department, he was said to have engaged in bullying behavior towards his subordinates, and he was apparently transferred as a punishment for that. I thought he might be reflecting on that, but instead, he catches newcomers like me, who can't possibly argue back, and engages in insidious harassment, shouting and lecturing. What happened just now, with Miller throwing documents at me, is one of the things he does regularly. What's really malicious is that he does these things where other employees can't see. Normally, if someone had been punished for bullying, they would make sure not to do it again. But in Miller's case, he's trying not to be found out, so he must not have any real remorse. Perhaps he does these things as a way to relieve stress, but my mental state has been steadily deteriorating because of him. I should have reported this, but the fact is I made a mistake at work, and I simply didn't have the courage to report his harassment. The nickname he's given me is the incompetent rookie. The word incompetence is something I'm quite familiar with, because I've been called that by my classmates since my student days. Even though I grew up playing outdoors in the countryside, I had almost no athletic ability. I fell during the relay race at the high school sports festival, and my team ended up in last place. Since then, I've been targeted by the muscle brain types and called by the nickname incompetent. After that, I quietly went about my life to avoid causing trouble for others, and I never experienced anything like bullying again. Being labeled like that even after becoming a full-fledged adult, it really gets me down. What's more, I'm still a recent college graduate. To be honest, I'm quite despairing about the future. Will I be able to make it as a working professional from now on? It's just the weight of anxiety that's burdening my heart. Then one day, I was entrusted with a major business deal. The other party is called Smith Trading Company, and it's a very large company around here. My nervousness reached its peak for this first major task, especially from Miller. I received threatening words like, "The representative from Smith Trading Company is coming, so make sure to be at the office before they arrive. If you're late, you'll easily lose your job." These were the intimidating words from my boss that made my stomach churn. To make sure I wouldn't oversleep, I set my alarm clock meticulously. The next day, I somehow managed to wake up on time, or rather, due to the nervousness, I hardly slept at all, and it was almost an all-nighter. But now, there's no way I'll be late. My head feels a bit foggy, but I made some coffee and forced my body into action. When I stepped outside, despite my feelings, the weather was surprisingly good. My condition might be at its worst, but I hoped things would go well for today's business meeting. I transferred trains and arrived at the nearest station to the company. From there, I have to walk about 15 minutes. During this time, buses are infrequent and crowded if you manage to catch one, so I usually prefer to walk. I always walk there because I dislike it. A big river running along the road, and you could see the mountains in the distance, making for a nice view. However, having grown up in the countryside, it is a familiar sight, so it doesn't feel particularly special. But today was different.
Is that elderly lady drowning?
I squinted with my sleep-deprived eyes. focusing on the elderly lady in the river. The downstream current wasn't too strong, but the water reached up to her knees. Her face was downturned, and she remained completely motionless.
Is she caught in the river's grip?
I thought it was a dire situation. When I was a child, I had a friend who nearly drowned in a river and was in mortal danger. Maybe that's why. My body moved before my thoughts could catch up. I quickly took off my leather shoes and socks, rolling up my pants below the knees, and hurriedly stepped into the river. It was deeper than I had anticipated, and my pants ended up getting wet. Nevertheless, I continued forward, step by step, to save the elderly lady.
Ma'am, are you okay?
I shouted loudly. And then,
Who the heck are you?
the elderly lady looked at me with a puzzled expression, casting suspicious eyes in my direction.
Yeah, she seems surprisingly lively. I thought you were in trouble and rushed over.
When I asked her fearfully, the old lady laughed funnily.
Who drowns in such a shallow river? It's not like I'm a child. I come here every morning before work to take a little dip in the water. Well, I only get my feet wet to freshen up, though.
I almost collapsed in the river, but I had to hold back since I couldn't afford to get completely soaked. Nonetheless, the shock was considerable. When I thought about it, there's no way someone could drown in a place like this. Just as the elderly lady had said, I was completely composed.
Darn it. Maybe it's because of the lack of sleep. Or perhaps I was just getting flustered because of work pressure. My suit is soaked. What am I doing? I see. Well, I'm glad you're okay, haha.
As I chuckled, she said to me,
It seems like I've caused you some trouble. Oh well, never mind. Let's get out of here.
I followed her as she led me back to the shore. There, she handed me a towel, and I used it to dry the wet areas as best as I could. However, I became somewhat pathetic and complained, It's always like this. I hate myself for being incompetent. In response, she smiled and said, It's been a while since I've seen such a reckless young person. I really like you. Her smile warmed my heart. The first time in a while I felt praised. Afterward, I parted ways with the elderly lady, feeling a bit uplifted. It seemed like today might turn out to be a good day. I only thought for a moment. As soon as I saw the clock, I felt the blood drain from my entire body. I had an important business meeting, but I was already late. I rushed to the company as fast as I could, but by then, the scheduled time had long passed, and Miller, visibly angry, was there. I told you not to be late. The representative from Smith Corporation is about to arrive any minute now. He scolded me before adding, This is why incompetence. He shook his head in exasperation, clearly disappointed. Upon seeing my drenched suit, he frowned deeply. What on earth are you wearing?
Well, you see,
I began to explain how I got wet while trying to help the elderly lady on the way. But he laughed at me and said there was no way he would believe such a story. You don't even have the brains to make up excuses. I've never seen a loser like you before. Stupid like you. Don't come to the company anymore. His words were nothing short of a barrage of insults. I bit my lower lip. I was already feeling mentally drained. But just then, the representative from Smith Trading arrived. In fact, she had been here a little earlier and had been observing the exchange between Miller and me. Miller's expression changed instantly. Oh, well, President Smith. He rushed over to the representative and greeted her. It seemed that today, the president of Smith Trading had come in person, and the entire office was tense. However, as I looked at President Smith, I couldn't help but exclaim, Oh, the reason was that standing there was the same elderly lady I had met by the river earlier.
Well, we just met.
The elderly lady, President Smith, said with a smile.
Wait, you're the president of Smith Corporation?
As I was stunned, my boss, who was standing nearby, asked in amazement, "Do you know this person?" I replied that this person was the one I tried to help in the river, although it was a misunderstanding. Miller, on the other hand, was left speechless with wide-open eyes.
That's right. This young man helped me out. I never thought he was an employee of this company. But, Miller, I heard what you said earlier. Your abusive language.
As President Smith narrowed her eyes and glared, Miller's body began to tremble uncontrollably. She was clearly furious. It sent shivers down my spine as well.
Did you call him incompetent and suggest that he is a stupid? Is that how you usually talk?
Well, Miller averted his gaze, but instead, a nearby supervisor asked him, "Is that true?" Realizing he couldn't escape, Miller laughed as if trying to play it off. Well, just a little. But I couldn't help but furrow my brow and ask, "Just a little?" Seeing my expression, President Smith remarked, "It seems like it's quite severe," and raised the corner of her eye even higher.
As someone who owns a company, I value my subordinates above all else. So what you did goes against my principles. Should I cancel our negotiations?
President Smith asked Miller, her face turning beet red as if her anger had reached its peak. In stark contrast, Miller's face turned pale. He immediately apologized to President Smith, but Miller was scolded for apologizing to the wrong person. Then he turned towards me and apologized for his actions. Due to the tense atmosphere that had developed, today's discussion was postponed. During this time, President Smith reminded superiors to take firm action against Miller, and I expressed my deep gratitude to President Smith once again. Then, President Smith offered a warm, thoughtful smile.
I like you. It's only natural to do something like this.
But I'm even happier that someone like you helped me. Well, I guess someone like me isn't worth helping, though.
Come on, don't look so gloomy again.
She exclaimed as she patted my back.
Have a little more confidence. No one will come near you if you keep wearing that anxious expression. You're a wonderful person, so try to smile from now on.
She smiled brightly, as if setting an example. Looking at that smile, I felt a change in my heart.
Hey, maybe I should try a bit harder. Eh?
President Smith's words cleared my clouded perspective in an instant. Another day, I successfully closed the business deal. My other superiors praised me with a "well done," and I felt a great sense of accomplishment. By the way, Miller finally left the company. Despite the fact that the issue of harassment in the workplace was originally brought up, there is no defense because he continued to do so in his new department. Thanks to this, the atmosphere in our department improved significantly. After that, I was able to focus more on my work. And gradually, I began to earn recognition from those around me. I could see that I, as a person, was slowly regaining my confidence. It was a sensation I had never experienced before. I undoubtedly received this renewed vigor from President Smith, who was always for me. Occasionally, when we met for business negotiations, she would ask me, "Are you doing your best? Or are you eating properly?" She treated me just like a real grandson, and despite meeting the most important person at our business partner's company, I always looked forward to these negotiations. One day, out of curiosity, I asked her why she ran the company. President Smith lowered her gaze slightly and murmured, "I just inherited my husband's company." Actually, Smith Trading Company was founded by Smith, her husband, over 30 years ago. At that time, she was just an ordinary employee. However, 8 years ago, her husband suddenly passed away. The energetic leader of the company had unexpectedly left this world, causing a great deal of turmoil among the employees. She was deeply saddened by her husband's death and fell into a state of depression so severe that she thought she would never recover. But at that moment, she recalled her late husband's smile. Smith Trading Company went through its ups and downs. Even when bankruptcy was at stake, her late husband always faced these challenges with a smile. Even in the most desperate situations, he never lost his smile. That became a source of strength for her. She realized that he would scold her if she kept crying like this. Motivated by this, President Smith made up her mind to carry on her husband's legacy. When I heard this story, something inside me started to grow. It's difficult to explain why, but I wanted to work under President Smith. I sensed that there was much more for me to learn from her kind personality and sense of responsibility. So right then and there, I asked President Smith, "Could I work under you?" President Smith enthusiastically embraced my shoulders and replied, "Love to have you," with a genuinely happy smile.
You're a wonderful person who can help strangers in times of need. Don't forget that recklessness when you jumped into the river.
Upon hearing this, I answered with a resounding yes.